Hey there, welcome back. If you didn't know, this is the second part of my gym leader video series, although I'm sure you can tell that by the title. If you want to get caught up with what I've done so far and my specific criteria that I set for myself, go check out my first video. I'll have it linked somewhere around here, description, card, whatnot, or you can just go check my channel. And if you want to see anything else, subscribe. But without further ado, we can go ahead and just jump back into the gym leaders again. So, last time on Making Gym Leaders, I ended off with our Psychic type, and now we'll be getting into the Ghost type Gym Leader, which, for my favorite Ghost type Pokemon, I ended up going with Shedinja, just because I think the gimmick of a Wonder Guard is so fun and goofy, only getting hit by special attack. So I went with that for his ace, and that was a weird way to start off with because it's not very obvious in terms of any kind of theming you can give for a gym leader. But for the gym leader himself, I thought it'd be fun to go with a phantom detective kind of vibe. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean, to be honest with you. But I guess some kind of Batman superhero figure esque guy, I guess. So he solves mysteries or whatever. But he's very mysterious, almost like a phantom. Ooh, perhaps. I think it'd be fun if maybe there's some kind of running, not like a running gag, but like a series of oh, is he a ghost or is he just a guy who's very mysterious or whatever? I don't know. I thought it'd be a fun, kind of unique flavor to give him to make him stand out more. For the design itself, I ended up taking a lot of inspiration from old pulp heroes, so like the Shadow, obviously, like I said, Batman, and others of the sort. More like detective based characters, I guess. Also, to play into the ghost kind of aesthetic, he's very gaunt and thin, so a lot of that will play into it. So he looks sickly esque, I guess. So maybe that will play into the ghost theming. For the rest of his team, I wanted to base it around Pokemon that might be useful for some kind of detective work. So Houndstone could be fun as a dog to sniff out the clues or whatever. Gourgeist is a light source, like a lantern to walk around. Poltegeist, because I figured I could play on the origin of the detective stereotype from Sherlock Holmes and the whole British tea time thing. Dusknoir, because obviously he has noir in the name. That's where a lot of the pulp comes from. It's more film noir esque aesthetic. And Mismagius, because I feel like she makes a fun Lady of the Night kind of design, and I feel like that would be very thematic for his team. The gym itself could be based around solving some kind of mystery. That'd be fun. Could kind of walk around. I don't know how exactly it'd be set up because it'd be in a gym, so you would know it might not be real, but maybe it could be set up as some kind of murder mystery plot or somebody quote unquote kidnapped a Pokemon or whatnot. And you'd have to solve the mystery of who got it. And then after solving all the clues and putting it together, maybe battling a few NPCs, you'd be able to challenge the gym leader, who I named Whisper, as you can see here now. And with all that, we can move on to our Ice type gym leader. So for our Ice type gym leader, we have Jack, who's a boss of a road cleaning crew, mainly cleaning off ice. So you see where I'm going with this? I really based the concept off something my own grandfather did whenever I was growing up. He was always in charge of coming down with the big plows and whatnot and pushing all the ice and snow off the road whenever it got snowy around here. But for his ace Pokemon, I went with Mamoswine, who I think is my favorite ice type, and also kind of my favorite ground type, but we'll get into the ground type whenever we get into it. For Jack, though, because of the inspiration I draw for his design, I went with an older man design. So I tried looking at other old man, I guess, characters they have in Pokemon, and I feel like the designs are pretty fun and varied between more scrawny and I guess more realistic old men and more muscular. I don't want to say muscular because that sounds weird, but more in shape old men. And I kind of tried going with the latter for this one, just to show off his strength. Although his physique does get very covered up by his outfit, which is pretty much just a standard work uniform. I imagine him and all of the people working on his crew and thus his gym kind of all wear the same general uniform. But yeah, for his team, like I said, I went with Paloswine for his ace, which I just think is fun. I just really like as a giant woolly mammoth kind of Pokemon. And I feel like the interaction I gave them is cute, the way he's petting it a little bit, he's done a job well done. Plus, it was fun getting to draw Paloswine being happy little guy, considering most of the time I think his art always shows him with very aggressive eyes. I don't know, because I think one of the characters in the anime had one, so I don't know if they change up there or not. I hope so. But for the rest of his team, I kind of base it around Pokemon to be very useful for working on ice and clearing that kind of area. So things like Alolan Sandslash, Beartic, Aurorus, Delibird, and Baxcalibur I thought would all be fun. I don't know anything about Scarlet and Violet, so I didn't choose a lot of those Pokemon for the teams because I really only wanted to go with Pokemon that I had like experience with. There's not a lot of very good Ice type Pokemon, so I just went ahead and gave them Baxcalibur. Plus, I could see Baxcalibur being useful for having to clear a road. For the gym itself, like many other ice gyms before it, I figured it could be based around an ice puzzle of sorts. However, here, instead of just slipping and sliding on ice and stopping and going to kind of figure your way out, I want to include a special element, which would be miniature snowplows that the player could push to clear some of the ice on the road, making a more natural walkway for the protagonist to walk through, and perhaps leading them into further mishaps or aiding them to get to the leader. Yeah, I think that's all I got for Jack, our Ice-type gym leader, so now we can go on to our Poison leader. Alright, for our Poison-type leader, we have Dox Nox, which was a fun name to come up with. So, like, Doc, like doctor, and Nox, like noxious. Anyways, my initial design concept going in for this was pretty varied. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with the Poison-type leader, because we don't have a lot in this series. So I ended up going with a kind of... I didn't want to go with like a poisoner kind of character because that feels a little cliche, maybe a little too on the nose, I guess. Plus, it's kind of like Koga and Jasmine are because they're like ninjas. So I ended up wanting to go with more of a doctor or chemist kind of look. I wasn't really sure which way it could fall, but I mean, both have some application to medicine, so we could just call her some kind of a medical doctor of some sort with a certain proclivity towards chemicals, or chemistry, I should say. But most of this design comes from the ace I picked for this, which was Beedrill, who I think it's really fun to think of Beedrill as the stinkers being sort of similar to like syringes, as you'll see in the hair design of our gym leader here. But I think it's fun, especially with a Mega Beedrill. It dead on looks like a giant like bug syringe. So I thought it'd be fun, and maybe she could do some unique customization with her Beedrill by potentially giving it access to new poisons it wouldn't naturally have in the wild. I think sometimes they do that in like the manga. They'll have like unique Pokemon attributes specifically to theirs based on the way they trained it. And again, because of my initial confliction with making her some kind of poisoner, chemist, doctor, whatever thing, I don't know if she should be like some kind of like part of like the evil team or whatever. I mean, if there, like, I assume is one, and it's like traditionally evil, I guess. But I thought it would make sense because, like, oh, poisoning. Poison's bad, and poison's very typically used as the bad team type that's most often used in the games. So it would make sense. Although, the way I drew her, I do like her a lot more as just a quirky, fun-loving chemist who just really is passionate about their job, I guess. And with her design, again, because it was more doctor-themed, I ended up trying to work myself away from just doing the same thing I did with Ripley's design. So as you'll see, her design is a bit more professional while still looking very personalized and kind of, not like slavish, but more attuned to how she would prefer to dress, I guess I should say. So the oversized lab coat reaching all the way down to her ankles almost. But you can see underneath she's still wearing a button-up shirt, so it's more professional looking overall. She has her hair tied up, which I thought was a fun design because it gives her silhouette a unique appearance. Although, unfortunately, by the way I drew her goggles, she does end up looking like she has very sad eyes for some reason. I don't know why I ended up taking it that way. I just like goggles that have like a kind of natural eye shape to them, I guess. Like getting back to her team and gym. Firstly, for her team, I want to base it more around different types of transmissions poisons can have. So obviously, Beedrill is like a syringe, as I've said previously. Muck is like sludge. Skuntank can create like airborne poisons. Drowsy is like, again, kind of like muck, toxic sludge, but it's more in like a pollution kind of way, I guess. Toxapex is, again, another like injection kind of poison transmission type. And lastly, Amoonguss, because, I mean, funguses are known for being naturally poisonous on their own. And for her gym itself, I thought it'd be fun if it would involve mixing chemicals in some way that would be able to open the doors to the new areas. So perhaps if you create the right concoction, it will melt the door like an acid almost. But you could melt the door that would lead you to the gym, but if it doesn't melt, a trainer will show up, you'll have to fight them, and maybe they'll open the door for you, or it'll open on its own, some way, shape, or form to get you to the gym. That's all I've got for Doc Nox, our poison type gym leader, and now we can move on to our steel type gym leader. So for our steel type gym leader here, we have Arth, who, as a mix of his type and interests, comes from King Arthur, and as I'm sure you'll see by the design showing up wrong here somewhere along the way, he's a kind of LARPer, I guess. I just don't know the exact words I need to put in, but he's just like a D&D LARPer, I guess, is kind of the inspiration I went for, because my favorite steel-type Pokemon is Aegislash, which is pretty generic, I guess, in answer. But, like, there's also just not a lot of steel-type Pokemon I'm particularly passionate about that I couldn't fit somewhere else in the categories. And I know it was used by the One Night Elite Four guy from Gen 6, but he was super boring, and I don't care about him. So I'm putting him here instead. Now, like I said previously, Arth is like a D&D LARPer kind of guy, so I wanted to make him like a knight to reflect the steel type. However, I think, ironically, his armor is all cardboard, none of it's metal. So I think that's a funny bit of irony with the design itself. I also have the funny idea that perhaps his Aegislash could be similar to Ripley's Behem, where it kind of takes pity on him in a bit. Or maybe Aegislash, based on whatever spirit resides within the sword, just genuinely enjoys being a sword in a knight's use, I guess. So maybe that'd be a fun way of making it different but similar by having them still have a unique connection as trainer and Pokemon, and as closer even as friends, really. I also came to a lot of weird kind of like conclusions that I would naturally draw about his character. Like, obviously he's a bit schlubbier and whatnot, and I assume maybe he like is some kind of like spoiled kid, kind of like our flying type gym leader, and maybe he also has his leader role through some kind of part of his parents. Maybe he's like kind of born into it, or naturally trained into it, whatnot. But yeah, I feel like it could lead to some unique story potential with him as a character, but I'm not here to write a story, I'm just here to make funny gym leaders. For the rest of his team, I've kind of based them off of different styles of armed combat in a sense. So like, obviously Aegislash is a sword and shield himself. Skarmory's kind of like a flying unit in a sense. There's not much I can pin that on outside of him being like some kind of plane. But he is like an armored bird, so I thought the theme would fit. Escavalier is like a lancer knight kind of guy, or jousting. Yeah, he's got like a joust kind of thing. Bisharp, obviously, he's like a chess piece, and he's steel type, and he's like a fighter, so it makes sense. Perscure is like a Viking type of character, so I feel like that could fit pretty well in with it. And Tinkaton is like a giant hammer user, so I figured that would fit his like little army he's made of his team. Also think a fun detail for his gym, if not necessarily making you have to LARP through it, because that would be pretty annoying. But I thought it'd be fun if all of the other NPCs in his gym could be role-playing as different traditional fantasy archetypes, so like a mage or a druid or a rogue kind of character, and use Pokemon that would make sense for their roles. So like a psychic-type team for the wizards, or a grass-type team for the druids, and so on and so forth. I feel like that could be a fun bit of flavor. It would make the gym a lot more interesting than just a bunch of swimmers using water-type Pokemon. Alright, and that's all I've got for our Steel-type leader, Arth. We can go ahead and get on to our Rock-type gym leader. Alright, and for our Rock-type gym leader, I found especially difficult to not just make him Brock from the anime, considering I grew up with it, and I love Brock as a character a lot. I think he's pretty funny, especially when I was growing up as a little kid. But I tried differentiating from that in some ways. I'll let you be the judge of how I did. But here we have Rockwell, name obviously related to rocks, and his ace Sudowoodo, which is my favorite rock Pokemon, and one I genuinely actually feel passionate about. I love him as a roadblock kind of Pokemon in Gen 2. I remember even sometimes still whenever I play him, if I don't have the right team to go against him, I get washed pretty hard if I'm not leveled up significantly enough. But I took a lot of Sudowoodo's lore and put that into the gym leader for what I kind of like base it around. So Sudowoodo, obviously likes to imitate trees. So I thought he'd have to be still a lot, obviously. And I think that's really fun if you give him to a trainer who's like a photographer. Because a photographer, especially a nature photographer, has to stay very still to take pictures of things like animals and whatnot to make sure they don't, ruin a shot or whatever. But I thought it'd be really, really cool, especially if he's like a landscape photographer. So it would play with the rock theming a lot more. So you could take pictures of different terrains and environments. I thought it'd be really fun. As you might be able to tell by the design, it's definitely more for function rather than fashion, considering how simple it is. And it's really just a lot of earthy tones to help him blend into the environment a lot more, so he can really just get around without bothering any of the wildlife he comes across. And Rockwell himself is also very thin and tall, so I figure that could also probably naturally just help him blend in with the environment a lot more, especially with his little beady eyes, which I think I like giving characters funny little like Tintin eyes. I just think it's very expressive while also still being very simplistic. For his team, I tried basing it around, it's obviously all rock type Pokemon, but I also wanted to base it more around different types of shots you can take in the environment. So Corsola would be like water and ocean kind of environments for him to, obviously snap pictures of. Crustle would be analogous to like deserts and plains and whatnot. Minior would make fun skyscapes, I think, especially if he could like call other Miniors to create a little like sky storm almost. Stojern can help with grassy plains kind of areas, like Stonehenge is. And Golem could make fun little mountainside pictures. And lastly, for his gym, I think, it might be a bit obvious, but I like the idea of it being a kind of like a Pokemon Snap kind of challenge where you just have to take the best picture. Maybe there's like other competitors there that you have to work against, like NPCs. I think it'd be fun as like unique kind of challenge to the gym where you take a picture, Rockwell judges it for you along with, 5 or so other NPCs in the gym, and all the ones who score better for their shots than you have to fight them before you can get to the Rockwell. So the better you are at taking pictures, the less you have to fight before you actually get to challenge the gym leader. Just a fun little thing I thought of. And that's all I've got for Rockwell, and we can head on to our ground-type gym leader. Alright, and our ground-type gym leader. This one was probably the gym leader I struggled the most on, because this is the one I really had the least ideas with going into it. At first, my favorite ground-type Pokemon I think is Sandslash, because I used it a lot. But it didn't give me a lot inspiration-wise. Like, my first initial thought was, it's like a hedgehog, like Sonic, so make it like a little animal hero team kind of thing. But I didn't know what to do for like the gym leader himself with that idea. So instead I went with a more like land explorer / kind of like cartographer job, I guess. So somebody who explores untapped terrain, who pretty much, brand new vistas, and he explores using his team, which could help him get through. So like I tried giving his team a lot of different Pokemon that could help him in his world-trotting journeys, I guess. So obviously Sandslash can help him like dig through the ground and whatnot. Quagsire can navigate marshy areas. Donphan's really, I don't think it's actually fast, but the way it rolls up could be very useful to get around. Flygon obviously can fly around. It's also just a very powerful Pokemon in and of itself. Rhyperior is another one that can like burrow through mountainsides or whatnot to, check out like things like underground mines and anything that might be useful down there. And Stunfisk might be helpful with capturing local wildlife to examine and study a little bit without necessarily harming them too much in the process. It could just use like a little bit of paralysis. So for the gym leader himself, Cliff, as I've named him, obvious name choice is obvious. I ended up giving him a much more simple design than I think I did with the rest of them. Just very like muscular kind of guy because he's obviously exploring uncharted territories. So he's going to get a lot of... so he's got to be pretty strong to be able to get through areas like that. I also tried giving what little clothes he actually does wear a kind of like mountain climbing kind of look. So like very earthy tones again. He just wears like a simple backpack, wraps up his waist, and he wears like some loose-fitting pants and like boots for him. So I feel like those fit him pretty well. Especially like the markings down the pants are very similar to things you'll see like harnesses whenever like you're mountain climbing. I imagine he mostly just keeps all that in his backpack though. And I really didn't feel like drawing harnesses because it's really hard. It's just like a lot to keep up with for the design. I also thought it was really weird whenever I was working on it, like the hair, like especially when I was finishing out the hairline and I was coloring it in, I was like, I don't know why I made him look inexplicably Slavic for some reason. it's just a weird route I ended up taking. I don't know why I did that, but I mean, I think the design ended up coming out all right. Not one of my favorites, but I think it still looks fine for what it is. To be honest, I mean, I am biased because ground is honestly probably like one of my least favorite types, just because there's not a lot to do with it outside of just dirt, mud, sand. Pretty boring, so far. And for his gym, I think it'd be fun if it had different puzzles based around movement. So I know people aren't a fan of HMs. I'm not saying bring HMs back, but I'm saying if we did still have it, it'd be fun if like, oh, you can, if you have surf already, you can use surf to get through this area, or if you don't want to do that, here's a tall grassy area where you can use cut, or you can use rock climb or whatnot to get through a different area. So it's kind of a unique challenge for you based on the kind of terrain that you would most like to go through. Whatever your team is most suited to tackle at that point, I guess. All right, and that's all for the ground. Now we can go on to our dark type gym leader. All right, and for the dark type gym leader, we have Han, who I went with a more corrupted or evil, dark, but like a more villainous martial artist design, and more definitely professional than I did with Ken. I also wanted to go with a more Chinese kind of like inspiration for it because I'm a big fan of like the Ip Man movies and like old Bruce Lee movies and things like that. So that's where I went with more of this design for. Plus, I think Han's really fun as like a name because whenever I was trying to think of the name for it, I was like, oh, it's like dark martial artist and stuff. And then I was thinking of like Shredder, and I was like, oh, Shredder, Foot Clan, Han, bada boom. But that's where I got the name and basic design concept from. Concept itself does come from his ace Pokemon, which is Urshifu Single Strike form, which is again like a later stage Pokemon, and I think it might be considered a mythical of some kind. I don't know how like classifications of legendaries and mythicals work anymore. I think Nebby like ruined that for everybody. But I just went with it like a normal Pokemon because like everyone who plays the game gets one, really. So it can't be that rare, really, right? Like in universe, I don't know. But for his outfit itself, it's very simple and straightforward because the character himself isn't, the way I would think of him isn't very like focused on fashion, obviously. He's just more like, just gaining power and strength and whatnot through challenging tougher and tougher opponents. So that's why his design is a lot more straightforward, to the point, no frills, really. This was also another unique one because for his team, unlike the rest of the team so far, where I've like tried to come up with an explanation for them, why they are the way they are. For this one, I just went with them completely based on just like which Pokemon are the most powerful, because that's really all this guy would care about, because he's more of like a bad guy, really. I don't know if I want him to be like a bad guy, or like he has some kind of like redemption, I don't know. Or like dark, just like semi-twisted morals, I don't know. But first Pokemon team is just Pokemon based around just being strong. So like Urshifu, Houndoom, Tyranitar, Shiftry, Drapion, and Pangoro. Also just really big fighty brawler types, I also think it'd be fun if maybe in the story you could play some kind of like a unexpected rival for Ken, considering he is obviously a much older guy and Ken's just like a little punk kid. But I knew, from what I understand of Ken's character in my little head, I imagine Ken would definitely be a big proponent of just challenging this guy just because he's big meanie or whatever. And for his gym, I thought it'd be fun if it could be a series of double battles with multiple trainers. Kind of like how in martial arts movies, the protagonist is always jumped by multiple lackeys all at the same time. So this would be the way of doing that in a Pokemon game. So like you don't get a partner, but you constantly are getting jumped by two people at the same time. And that's kind of the way you can work the dark element into it, by it being like an evil strategy, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for our boy Hand here and his Urshifu. Now we can move on to our Fairy-type gym leader. And our Fairy-type gym leader here is Weyard, who I'll admit it has a strange name. Maybe even call it weird, because I did base it on the 3 witches from Macbeth, which I know is a weird inspiration to pull from for Pokemon, but it's just an idea I've had in my head since I had to read Macbeth in high school. But I think like the sisters' names are often translated as the Weird Sisters, Wayward Sisters, so I ended up combining all those into Weyard, who, as you can see by the design, hopefully showing up sometime around now on the screen, she's very witch-themed, and that's because her ace Pokemon is Hatterene, which I know got a lot of focus in Sword and Moon, and I guess arguably could be like a main Pokemon to kind of like, or a main used Pokemon to kind of like break my rules I set for myself. But I like Hatterene, and she's fun, so I just went with that. Especially because it fits like the theme I want to go with, like a witch's coven, which I think makes her very unique. Because I think Opal in Sword and Shield was trying to be that kind of like witch character with like her nose and being like an older lady, but she, because of the focus on like the sport aspect of Pokemon training in that game, I just don't feel like the design came through at all. She ended up just looking like a fashionista kind of character more than anything. So for Weird here, I wanted to go with a classic witch design, straight on the point, except for maybe like the green skin, really. But I wanted to keep all the other basic attributes. So like the dark clothes, big pointed nose, old woman, broomstick and whatnot. I had a lot of fun designing with this one. Just giving her like a fun, like creepy cloak and like a gaunt, sickly silhouette kind of design to contrast her. I think, I don't want to say beautiful because the internet does what they do to Hatterene, but you know, like the more elegant design that Hatterene has and kind of like flowy silhouette her hat thing gives off. But I just thought it was kind of fun and cute the way that their hats kind of matches like twinsies, witches hats or whatever. Also like the idea that whenever Weird summons her Pokemon, like whenever she summons the balls, she literally just conjures them in the air and like throws the ball out. I think it's a fun way of like working in the magical abilities and with like some fun like sprite work, I guess. Kind of like how the psychic trainers always float the balls above their heads. And again, for a team, I wanted to make it more obviously witch or fae kind of designed. So things like Hatterene, obviously, and Gardevoir, because they're more like feminine witchly, I guess. Florges is another one. Klefki, that's just like a big, like kind of like trinket. I think the way that works, like a witch's trinket. And Shiinotic and Ribombee as like a more forestry fae-esque, I guess. And they definitely seem like Pokemon that would help her in gathering ingredients for a witch's brew. And again, going with the witch's brew theming, I feel like that could be the challenge of her gym. I thought it could be fun if you have to kind of like scour some kind of nearby area to find ingredients for the brew, kind of like Mallow's challenge from Sun and Moon, having to scour the forest for the right ingredients. Maybe if you get the wrong ingredients, instead it will summon an NPC to fight you. Woo! But if you get the correct ingredients, you'll get to challenge the gym. Therefore, your ability to create the brew correctly would reward you. Alright, and I think that's all I've got for Weird. Now we can move on to our last gym leader of the series, which will be our Dragon-type gym leader. And our last gym leader is Seto, our Dragon-type gym leader. And I'm sure many of you Yu-Gi-Oh fans out there can tell where the name comes from, but yeah, it obviously comes from Seto Kaiba, who's, I think, the most iconic for his blue eyes white dragon. But the design itself, I wanted him to be a kind of all-terrain vehicle pilot, which is a weird statement just to say, I guess. It's like a job, but like I feel like it works if I explain it a little bit. So like Dragon-type Pokemon are pretty varied in terms of their design and what they can do. So I feel like it'd be really fun to kind of work that into the kind of job, I guess, as the trainer would have. As like an all-terrain kind of pilot, considering he can use his Pokemon to help him with his work, because there's a lot of Dragon-type Pokemon that soar through the air, swim through the sea, or burrow underground. So I feel like it'd be a good way of working his Pokemon into what his natural job would be. And for his ace, my favorite Dragon-type Pokemon, I just went with Noivern, because I think it's a really fun design, because it definitely works its way into not just being a dragon, but just being a fun, like, fusion of animals, because it's like a bat dragon, and I think it's a very cute and very fun design. Also, I tried to, like, work the cute factor in with Seto, scratching the fuzz on Noivern's neck and it reacting. I imagine it kind of purring like a cat almost, although I don't know if bats purr. If they do, it'd be really funny. Obviously, for Seto's design itself, he's very pilot-esque, although I tried making it a little bit more professional and a little bit more varied than just Wright's design. Considering he's not just a pilot, he also he operates all kinds of vehicles, like boats, subs, excavators, all kinds of things, really. So I feel like I wanted to work that in, so I feel like it works a little bit better, I guess. I don't know. I also wanted to make his his undershirt kind of match Noivern's color to really show that like Noivern's like his main Pokemon, I guess, in a sense. And like I said before, his all of his Dragon type Pokemon are based on different terrains. So, like Noivern, his ace, Kingdra for the sea, Druddigon for deep cave systems, Goodra for the plains and wetlands, Komao for rocky areas, and Flapple for just basic all-terrain purposes. Because I feel like that Flapple can work in most environments because it is just a grassy dragon. And I really, really like the idea of his gym being like a giant airship, kind of like the blimp from Battle City in a way, to work in the Yu-Gi-Oh inspiration. And maybe the challenge could be different rooms you could go into, would be different terrains filled with different types of Pokemon, different trainers who use different specialties. So they could all use like Dragon type Pokemon, obviously, but it'd be like one would have a bunch of like Horsies and whatnot, like water type Dragon Pokemon, or the other one could just have a bunch of like flying Dragon type Pokemon, a bunch of ground Dragon type Pokemon. But you know what I mean. I think it's a fun way to base the challenge off of the guy's like actual job and natural proclivities. All right, and that's all of the gym leaders I had. I had a lot of fun working on these. I feel like I got to practice a lot and get a little bit better with my art, hopefully. I definitely learned a new shading technique I'm a really big fan of. I will be using that a lot more. Even for like Seto's design, I ended up like, before working on it, I spent like a day just practicing with my pen, trying to make it work in a way that I like a little bit better, I guess. So I hope maybe that turns out in the art, I guess. But I think that's it. If you want to tell me what your favorite trainer was from the series in the comment, I'd love to know. Any critiques, criticisms too, I would also appreciate. And anything else you want to say? Go for it, I guess. I don't know. But if you would like to, feel free to do all those quirky little YouTube things like liking and subscribing and the bell and comments, whatever else that I'm supposed to ask you to do here. But if you would like to, all the support helps. I enjoy getting to see people. I enjoy comments the most. I like getting to see what people think of the videos. So, I mean, if you want to do that, you can. If you want to see any of the art from the videos, you can check out in like the description or in the about on my channel or whatever. I'll have it somewhere. You can find my Twitter account. I have like all of the art on there. So if you want to use them for anything, just go ahead and go for it. I would like if you ask me, but if you don't, I'm not gonna hissy fit about it. I promise. But I think that's all I really have for right now. So, like I said, feel free to do all the YouTube stuff. Comment if you liked the video. I would like to know what you liked. And if you disliked it, leave a comment too. I'd like to know what you thought I could do better. Always striving to grow and get better. But I think that's going to be all for me. And I'll hope you have a good rest of your day, afternoon, night, evening, whatever it is for you. And I'll hopefully see you in the next one. So, I'll see you when I see you.